This episode of the Amateur Traveler podcast is sponsored by Smart Travel, a new podcast from NerdWallet. You know, the one friend who always finds the best travel deals, picks the right cards, and somehow ends up in first class for the price of coach? Smart Travel is like that friend, but in podcast form. They cover all things travel finance, like how to use AI to plan a trip that doesn't optimize you into a 6-hour layover, how to survive and even save on holiday travel, even if you're booking late. Oh, I need that one. And standby and last minute travel plays that actually work without living at gate C23. And Smart Travel does that all with a little bit of humor and a lot of travel smarts. I am not the expert on these kind of questions, and one of the places I go to find my answers is NerdWallet. Upgrade trips, not bills, with NerdWallet. Follow Smart Travel wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks to Smart Travel and NerdWallet for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Here's the thing about being a great gift giver. When you find something truly perfect for everyone on your list, you almost don't want to give it away. That's what happens with me with my quince order. Everything's so soft and well made, I'm seriously tempted to keep it all for myself. Quince pretty much has your whole list covered. Mongolian cashmere sweaters for $50 when you normally pay $200 or more for them, the kind you'd wear on repeat. Then there's the denim that goes with everything, silk tops and skirts for when you want to look put together, cashmere beanies and scarves and down jackets that actually keep you warm. By working directly with trusted factories that maintain high standards for both craftsmanship and ethical practices, and by cutting out the middlemen and markups, Quince is able to pass those savings straight to you. You've heard me talk about how much I love my Quince travel pants. My wife's pants are now on order too, because she's heard me talk about it a lot, even though she doesn't listen to the show. Find gifts so good you'll want to keep them with Quince. Go to quince.com/traveler for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Amateur Traveler, episode 973. Today, Amateur Traveler talks about a cat city, street food, ancient art history and philology, a mine train, and floating lanterns as we go to Northern Taiwan. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about Northern Taiwan. I would like to welcome back to the show Lee Moore, the author of China's Backstory and the host of the Chinese Literature Podcast, and also a guest emeritus on Amateur Traveler. If you haven't heard Lee, it's because you haven't gone back to some of the episodes of the show from the first decade. So Lee has been on the show 4 times, all the 4 times talking about China, including Beijing, side trips from Shanghai, the Yunnan province, and the Gansu province of China. Lee, welcome back to the show.
Chris, thanks so much for having me back.
And since you have been on the show, you've gotten your PhD, which you were working on when last we talked.
Yes, I was just beginning that journey.
And oddly enough, I just re-listened to that episode, not even thinking about Lee coming back on the show, because I had forgotten we had done an episode on the Gansu province of China, which I was just in this summer. And when I discovered it, I decided I needed to re-listen and figure out why I had forgotten about it. But it was a long time ago. But we are not talking about mainland China today. Where are we talking about?
Northern Taiwan.
Excellent. And what is your connection with Taiwan?
Right before we recorded that episode on Gansu, I actually was living in Taiwan. So I lived in Taiwan for the school year from 2013 to 2014, studying Chinese literature in Chinese there in Taipei. And I've gone back a couple of times. Most recently, I went back in May of 2023, this time now with 2 kids. So it was a very different experience for me a decade later.
And I assume these were your 2 kids rather than just
They were. They didn't get some random kids in the airport. Although
okay.
At times I thought about exchanging my children for.
Understood.
It's a 14-hour flight. It was rough for an 8-month-old.
Got it. And why should someone go to Northern Taiwan?
There's so much history there. There's so much beauty. And when I try and convince people to go to Taiwan, I oftentimes jokingly say, China's thinking about invading, so why not see it while you still can?
We're gonna get me in trouble with the Chinese Tourism Board before this show is up here. Excellent. What itinerary are you going to recommend for us?
When I was looking back at some of the previous shows, I know you had an early guest who did some things in Taipei. So I was going to try and hit some of the sites in Taipei that they missed and then hit some of the areas outside of Taipei, but are within an easy kind of day's journey.
Okay.
You don't need to change hotels. So the first place in Taipei that I was going to mention is probably the most famous place in Taipei. It's the most famous museum in the Chinese speaking world. It's the National Palace Museum. It's the
I've seen the outside of the National Palace Museum on a layover tour, but it hadn't opened yet. It was early in the morning, so I did not get inside. And this is where a lot of the national treasures of China are, which they're sensitive to.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story because you this summer went to Beijing's Palace Museum, right?
Yeah.
So the split between the two is a really interesting history. Adam Brooks, he's a journalist and novelist. He wrote a history of it a year or two ago called Fragile Cargo that details how those two institutions actually split apart. It's a really interesting story, but basically World War II happened. The treasures were moved from Beijing, where they originally were part of the Qing imperial, just the collection of the emperors. And then they moved around China a bunch. Amazingly, very little was destroyed. And then the Civil War happened. The KMT took most of the best stuff to Taiwan, and the remainder was left in China. So you have these fascinating objects that are from a couple of thousand years of Chinese history, all there in this museum. The collection itself is so vast and the space so small that I've heard they change exhibits about every quarter, and it takes about 10 years to go through the entire thing. One of the things that I was thinking about when I was trying to figure out how to explain the museum, you can't really talk about what you are going to see because it's constantly changing and they're bringing in different exhibits. There are some perennial favorites, but I should warn you that some of the perennial favorites, particularly the famous jade cabbage, which is just this magnificent piece of jade that's been carved to look so like a lifelike bok choy Chinese cabbage. That's no longer in the Palace Museum in Taipei. They actually opened another one about 200 miles south of Taipei. And I guess just to encourage people to go to the other museum, the other National Palace Museum. They have some of the national treasures down there. But the stuff that you're going to see in the Taiwanese one is still quite stunning. You've got a lot of ancient bronzes from the Zhou dynasty. So we're talking from 1000 BC to 250 BC. Lots of incredible paintings from Imperial China, all kinds of stuff that's really fascinating and something that makes this museum an institution comparable, I would say, to the Louvre or the British Museum or the Smithsonian. In terms of the space, it's much smaller than the Louvre, but in terms of the quality of works, it's on the same level.
Excellent.
When I pitched the show to you, I mentioned that one of the things I would be talking about is how child-friendly travel in Northern Taiwan is. A lot of these museums, and the Palace Museum has this, they have child spaces. So you can actually take kids there, and they have a little Chinese imperial artwork themed playroom where kids can go and play around. And like I said, I had an 8-month-old and a 4-year-old, and they had a blast while I was actually up in the upstairs doing research.
Funny.
The National Palace Museum, it's not hard to get to. It's very easy for an independent traveler to get to. There's a little bit that's funky to get there from downtown Taipei, which is basically Taipei main station. You would take the red line northwards on the subway, go to Shilin station, get off at Shilin, and there are several buses that actually go there. It's probably a couple of miles up into the mountains from there. There are lots of English signs explaining where to go. You're not going to be the first person who doesn't speak Chinese to get off at Shilin station and want to go to the National Palace Museum. You have to jump from subway to a bus, but it is quite easy to do.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to recommend, so there's a trend in Taiwan where they actually have restaurants for shrimp fishing. It's
Okay.
basically they have a giant restaurant that has a concrete pool in the middle, and they stock it with shrimp. And you go there and pay by the hour, and you throw your rod out and try and catch as many shrimp as you can. It's very fun. And the idea being, I think you would normally accompany that with a cheap Taiwanese beer, and then they will cook your shrimp for you. For different restaurants do it differently, but normally you pay a fee for them to cook your shrimp, or you can actually cook it yourself. But there's about a half dozen to a dozen of these shrimp fishing restaurants just less than a mile up the road from the National Palace Museum. But basically, you get to the Palace Museum, there's only one road in front of it going into the mountains. You go east about a mile, maybe less than that. It's a 10, 15-minute walk. And you get a very Taiwanese experience. It's something that I feel like you would meet a different segment of the Taiwanese population than you would if you're simply hitting the tourist spots. And because it's so close to the Palace Museum, I think they've had lots of non-Chinese speaking tourists coming in.
Got it.
So that's a very touristy spot. Any guidebook is going to have that. Next, I would recommend going a little bit further out. We're still in Taipei, but this is a spot, the Museum of the Institute of History and Philology. It sounds very boring.
Okay. It does.
Let me tell you. So this is maybe even cooler than the Palace Museum, but you won't find it mentioned in, I don't think, any guidebook. Before, when I was preparing for the show, I checked Lonely Planet. They don't have it. They've never had it. I haven't checked all of the other guidebooks, but I can say this. I wrote my dissertation for my PhD on Chinese museums, and I've never actually encountered any scholar writing about this particular museum, which is strange because it has this incredible collection. The museum was basically the product of the 1920s, 1930s. Taiwan was still not Chinese territory. It was a Japanese colony. At the time, China was being run mostly by this group, the KMT, and China is starting to modernize. They do these archaeological expeditions in central China, in Anyang, to the very beginnings of Chinese civilization. So they do a dig in northern Henan, and they find the last capital of the Shang dynasty. So the Shang dynasty, Chris, before the show, we were talking about how dynasty dates can confuse people. The Shang dynasty ends around, I think, 1045 BC. So really old. This is the origins of Chinese writing. This is the earliest Chinese writing we have. They would carve these earliest Chinese characters onto the inside of tortoise shells or animal bones, and it would be very simple messages to the gods asking questions. Should I attack the dude to my north on Monday or Wednesday? And then they would throw the bones in the fire, and however the cracks cracked, it would give the answer. Do it on Monday. Do the attack on Monday. Should I get married on
divination? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this is incredibly ancient, and it's the only place I've seen a cool collection of these ancient writings on display. They have it right there in that museum. They also have an archaeological dig with a significant amount of human sacrifice. So one of the images that I have from the museum has 15 human skulls that were taken from this dig. The Shang dynasty was one of the most prolific in terms of human sacrifice. And so you have a very interesting dig that talks about human sacrifice. You have these Zhou dynasty bronzes. Some of them are giant. Some of them are quite small. Bronze vessels that are from the period Zhou dynasty is 1045 to 250 BC. It's really old stuff. Very cool. And no one knows about it. No one knows about it.
And you mentioned it's a history of philology. We probably ought to mention briefly what philology is for those of us who don't have a PhD. So that would be also called historical linguistics these days. So
basically.
The development of language. Yeah.
Yeah. They came up with the name for the institute in the 1920s and the English name for the English translation of the institute. So I don't think they would translate it that way today. I think it would just be a history museum with artifacts and linguistic stuff. So it's a very cool museum. I was mentioning that it's not mentioned in any guidebooks. The reason for that is twofold. It's a little bit tough to get to. It's not impossible.
Mhm.
And it's also only open 3 days a week, which is actually better than when I first went to it. It was only open 2 days a week in 2016. So it's the situation has actually gotten better. It's open Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. So if you're in Taipei, you'll have to figure out what days you want to go. It's not something you can just, like the National Palace Museum is going to be open, I believe, 7 days a week. Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday. You also have to go to the very end of the subway line. So it's in Academia Sinica, which is a large government run think tank that's in the suburbs of Taipei.
Okay.
From Taipei main station, you take the blue line east all the way to the end of the line to Nangang Exhibition Center. And then you go south to Academia Sinica. There are some buses that can take you most of the way, but you'll be relying some on Google Maps. Google Maps is definitely going to be your friend. Normally, when I've gone there, I actually just walk because it's only about 15-20 minute walk from the subway station. And if you've got Google Maps, you should be fine. But the Museum of the Institute of History and Philology, it's a mouthful. It's something that I think listeners will definitely find that their friends who have been to Taiwan haven't been there. It's definitely off the radar, and I would say really worth it.
Aura Frames is the answer to every holiday gifting moment. Never struggle again to find the perfect holiday gift. I have my Aura frame in front of me at all times and turned on with pictures of the people I love. I recommended it recently in a short form video, and a friend said she bought one and loves it. What pictures would you put on an Aura frame for a friend or loved one that would make it special for them? Aura Frame includes a gift box. Every frame comes packaged in a premium gift box with no price tag. And you can preload photos before it ships. Keep adding them from anywhere, anytime. Don't wait. Win the holidays now with Aura Frames. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver Matte Frames, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using promo code TRAVELER at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code TRAVELER. This deal is exclusive to listeners, and frames sell out fast. So order yours now and get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. And thanks to Aura Frames for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Time. It's always vanishing. The commute, the errands, the work functions, the meetings, selling your car. Unless you sell your car with Carvana. Get a real offer in minutes. Get it picked up from your door. Get paid on the spot. So fast, you'll wonder what the catch is. There isn't one. We just respect you and your time. Oh, you're still here? Move along now. Enjoy your day. Sell your car today.
Carvana.
Pickup fees may apply.
Next thing I would recommend, so you're done, you spent all morning in the Palace Museum. You got over to Nangang Exhibition Center and got to Academia Sinica and saw the Museum of the Institute of History and Philology. It's the end of the day. You've got to go to one of Taiwan's famous night markets. Night markets have become a thing that's discussed endlessly on Reddit forums about travel to Taiwan. They are fascinating. I was talking with my wife about it, and she and I both agree that when you live there, it gets old because the food is incredible, but it's like going to the Iowa State Fair every night. It's just fried stuff. It's really good, really delicious fried stuff, but eventually you're going to make yourself sick. I said it's just fried stuff. I should probably correct that and say, actually, a lot of it is fried stuff, but it's really good fried stuff. But they also have a variety of other things. In terms of what night markets are, in Taiwan, they have this tradition going back, I don't know how long, but they will have a selected street that they will just mostly shut down to traffic, and you'll have vendors all along the side of the road, small vendors who are selling various things. They open up usually at 5 p.m. They close normally at midnight. And in between there, it's one of the funnest, coolest places to be in Taiwan, just because there are so many people packed into such a small area. The Chinese have a word "renao" that just means hot and lively. I think that's the place that most typifies it for me, the night markets. There's usually most of it's food. There's some kind of carny games. There's so many different kinds of foods, and they're constantly changing. So it's not like I can recommend a particular thing, but lots of fried stuff, like I said, deep fried mushrooms, all kinds of stuff barbecued on a stick. You have lots of good Vietnamese food in night markets. There's been a large number of women who have come to Taiwan to marry Taiwanese men, and oftentimes they bring their cooking skills. So you have lots of good Vietnamese food, fried swordfish, deep fried squid. There's just so much. Which night market should you go to? Shilin is the most famous one, and that's the one that's near the stop for the National Palace Museum. I actually think that one's a little overrated and touristy. It's not horrible, but I would recommend going to a different one, Ningxia Night Market, which is about a 15-minute walk north of Taipei main station. It's a fun one. It's more Taiwanese. I think Shilin has this reputation of being more for foreign tourists. I think it's the most interesting night market that's easily within reach within the city. There are others that I could recommend. Raohe, which is closer to Academia Sinica. There's Lehua, which is south of the city a little ways. Guangzhou Street Night Market is also very good, but it's a little bit rough. That area has a history. So Taiwan is incredibly safe. So I would still feel comfortable recommending any amateur traveler going there. But that area does have a reputation for gangs and the things associated with gangs. So there's a significant amount of gambling and prostitution in the region. I've gone there many a times. I don't hesitate to recommend it, but I think you will see a different side of Taiwan. It's the only place where I can think of where there's a significant amount of homelessness in Taiwan, that particular area around there. So just to flag that.
Okay.
Interestingly, when we were there, my wife took my two daughters there. Liz Truss, the former British Prime Minister of lettuce fame, actually was visiting Taiwan, and they took her there. And Liz Truss accidentally bumped into my wife and kids while in the Ningxia market there. So it's one of those things that I think may be becoming more widely known to those in the know.
Got it.
Okay, so you ate way too much fried food last night. What are you going to do the next day to work off those calories? I'd say go on a hike.
Okay.
The cool thing about Taipei is that it's in this basin, which allows for very easy access to hiking. It's surrounded by mountains on all sides. The hike that I wanted to recommend is called Elephant Mountain. It's easily reachable with the Taiwanese subway. You get off at the subway stop Shangshan, Elephant Mountain, and it's about a 10-minute walk, and you're climbing up the mountain through some Buddhist temples, and then you go to the top of this mountain that looks out from the east of Taipei, and you actually get a great view of Taipei 101, once the tallest building in the world, and still this kind of iconic image.
Until 2008, if I remember correctly.
Sounds right, yeah. So the hike is great. For someone who's coming from an American perspective, the hikes in Taiwan and Japan feel much more intense. It's just basically stairs. So be ready for that. But it offers a really great view once you get to the top of Elephant Mountain. And from Elephant Mountain, you can actually do a lot of different hikes up there. But I think Elephant Mountain is one of the iconic ones. And there's lots of good Instagrammable places. They have a heart that you can stand inside of when looking out over the city of Taipei. Another hike that I was going to recommend, or it's actually more of a series of hikes and activities. So there's a train line called the Pingxi Line. We're getting outside of Taipei now, but it's still within easy reach of a day trip of Taipei. The Pingxi Line is an old Japanese rail line that was built to supply coal to the empire in the 1920s, and it is a spur off the main line. So you can leave Taipei main station and go to the Pingxi Line. It starts in Ruifang, and it's just a very old train line that's mostly dedicated to tourism now. It was this kind of rundown industrial part of Taiwan that was almost abandoned. And then someone realized, let's turn this into a tourist hotspot. And so that's exactly what happened. There are a couple of stops along the Pingxi line that I would recommend. You can go to Hotong. It's one of those old mining villages that was mostly abandoned a couple of decades ago. It nearly died out. And then a bad thing started happening. Taiwanese folks just started abandoning their cats there. And cats came to take over this entire village. There were 100 times more cats than there were humans. Probably actually the ratio is much, much higher, cat to human. And some genius in the Taiwanese tourism office decided that this was actually an opportunity. We could brand this dying village, Cat Village, and have tourists come here. And so you can just go take the train to the stop and hang out with a bunch of cats. Cats pretty much rule the village. It's a lot of fun. It's become a great place to do. They have lots of Instagrammable spots. They also have a cool mining museum that's free, I believe. And they have another area that's called the Hotong Pit Mining Leisure Park. It sounds crazy. That one's not free. The Pit Mining Leisure Park is not free, but I would definitely recommend it. It's just across the river from the mining museum. There's a small pedestrian bridge that goes across there. It's a train that you can get on and use the tracks that used to go into the mines. You go into one of the old coal mines and you get to ride around. It's a fairly short train ride, but it's a lot of fun. My daughters loved it. And actually, it's interesting. They have this point where you get off the train and you can do these incredibly dangerous activities. They just have some old mining tools, like a jackhammer that I and my 4-year-old were able to just jackhammer our way through some rocks and stuff. It's one of those things like where you go from the US, this litigious society, you would never be able to do anything like that. But they have a jackhammer. You can jackhammer stuff. They have one of the old pump cars that was used there that you can ride around on. It's a lot of fun. Highly recommend it. From there, on the Pingxi line, you can continue on. There's Sandiaoling, which is the second station. It has a very cool waterfall hike that you can do. You actually get to climb up the side of a waterfall and stand on top of it. It's a very fun hike. The views are not as good as Elephant Mountain, but I think the hike itself is better. It's much longer. The Elephant Mountain hike is short. Sandiaoling is probably a couple of miles. And then finally, one thing I would recommend to do on the Pingxi line is go to Pingxi Station itself. Pingxi Station, the old street has this kind of old Taiwan feel to it. They also have a thing called sky lanterns, which are just basically hot air balloons where they have paper lanterns that they've made. You can purchase them and they put a candle, sometimes a very big candle, at the bottom there. And it creates a hot air balloon. Before you put the candle in there, you write something on it, a message for world peace. And then whoever you buy it from puts the candle in there. You stand on the train tracks, obviously not when the train is coming, but you stand on the train tracks and you let it heat up and throw your sky lantern into the sky. And especially during Chinese New Year, they have a couple of celebrations where they just have massive numbers of sky lanterns.
Now, the one question I have with that is that seems like you're going to catch the city on fire or things like that.
It's a massive fire hazard and also not great for the planet. You're absolutely right. Some advice my mom gave me when I was very young might come into play here, but everybody's doing it, so it must be okay. Yeah. So there are environmental concerns. They do actually have, I think, especially during the festivals, they do have firefighters at the ready there to put things out. They've been doing it for decades now. It hasn't burned down yet. I don't know what else to say. Your personal environmental mores may come into play here, and you might want to skip that if that's not your thing. But tons of Taiwanese people are there doing it, and lots of foreign tourists go there and do it.
Okay.
I wanted to mention another spot that is very close to the Pingxi line. Jiufeng is discussed a lot in these discussions of Taiwanese travel. Jiufeng is like Pingxi, an old mining town. It's an old gold mining town. It's near Pingxi. It's a little bit more difficult to get to, not much. You have to go to Reifang Station and then take a bus. There's no train line that goes directly there. It's become very famous in Taiwan travel circles because it was the setting for a movie, A City of Sadness, and many people have discussed it as being the setting for the town in Spirited Away, the Miyazaki film. That's probably not true. It probably wasn't the setting or the inspiration for the Miyazaki film. At least that's what Miyazaki has said. But it does have this very old Taiwanese, Japanese colonial era look. It's a town that was abandoned.
This is the same city as also known as Jiufen?
Yeah, Jiufen.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's in a similar area to Pingxi, just in the mountains there.
Okay.
East of Taipei City. Again, it makes for a great day trip. I would say, though, I think Jiufen is a little overrated for me personally. I don't think there's that much interesting to do there. If you've been to Pingxi, consider skipping Jiufen if you don't have time. One thing I would say that Jiufen stands out compared with the small villages on the Pingxi line. Jiufen is much more photogenic. So if photography is an important part of what you do when you travel, definitely do go to Jiufen, because even though there's not much to do in Jiufen, it's incredibly beautiful and it has this old world air to it, especially at night.
Okay.
Going back, so the Pingxi line and Jiufen are good day trips that are to the east of Taipei City, easy to reach within probably an hour and a half train ride. Another thing I would recommend, but this time north of Taipei, is the suburb of Beitou. So Beitou is a famous hot springs village that the Japanese built. And it's incredibly easy to reach by subway. It's maybe 25-minute subway ride up from Taipei Main. And there are world-famous hot spring hotels there. It's very similar to onsen in Japan because Taiwan's hot springs culture is entirely derived from Japanese onsen culture. There are probably, I think, 20 to 30 different hot springs hotels. They're all fairly interesting and they're going to have slight variations, but most of them are large hotels that you go into. If you're using the public baths, you would split. Men go to one bath, women go to another bath, and soak in there with other people. It, I think, cost about $5. The one I went to was built in 1907, has some beautiful architecture inside there. It's a very interesting, very Taiwanese experience. And like I said, a very easy day trip up there.
Okay.
One other thing that I'm going to recommend. So we're now I haven't been keeping track, day 3, day 4, something like that. One thing I would recommend also, if you have an extra day, Taipei is surrounded by ocean on 3 sides. It's in a basin, in a kind of bowl. So you have to do a little bit of work to get to the ocean, but there are lots of great beaches. If you're a beach person, there's a lot of opportunities. I would recommend, if I had to pick one, my favorite is definitely Waiao Beach, which is, again, about hour and a half, 2 hours train ride from Taipei Main. Very easy to get to. Black Sand Beach. They have tons of surfing you can do. You can rent a surfboard. There are lots of shops set up there on the beach. Lots of people selling food and drinks. And lots of families just hanging out for the day. It makes for a really fun day if you have that extra time.
When the holidays start to feel a bit repetitive, reach for a Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry and put your twist on tradition. A bold cranberry and winter spice flavor fusion, Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry is a refreshing way to shake things up this sipping season. And only for a limited time. Sprite, obey your thirst.
We find Vecna, we end this once and for all. Together.
On December 25th.
We have a plan. It's a bit insane. Everyone in?
He knows where we are.
Watch out!
Get ready for one last adventure.
We stay true to ourselves. Stay true to our friends, no matter the cost.
Found you. Stranger Things Season 5 Volume 2 begins December 25th, only on Netflix.
So those are the specific sites that I was thinking of seeing. But when I pitched you on this, I talked about how great of a location Taiwan, Northern Taiwan is as a family destination. I don't think it's usually talked about in those terms, but we took, like I said, an 8-month-old and a 4-year-old there, and we had a blast. I was there, so I got a research grant in 2019, late 2019, to do research in 2020 in Taiwan at Taiwanese museums. Of course, that didn't happen because I couldn't get into
there was something going on.
You may have talked about it a couple of times on the show, but I had my second child in 2022, and I was getting to the point where I had to either use the grant or lose it. And so we went in May 2023, not really sure if it would work out. It turns out it was fantastic. Taiwan has, like many other places in Asia, struggled to make enough babies in terms of not hitting the reproduction rate, which is something that concerns a lot of government officials there. And so the positive side of that for you as a traveler is that the Taiwanese government has invested heavily in lots of child-friendly facilities. The airport at Taipei, Maine has a Hello Kitty breastfeeding center, a breastfeeding room, which is, I just want to say, it's awesome. I went in there to help out my wife some. If you're a Hello Kitty fan, it's a really cool, fun thing. Breastfeeding rooms are all over Taipei and even some in the countryside. So very friendly in those terms. Playgrounds are all over the place. They've done a great job of building some great playgrounds throughout the city. And one thing that in doing research to prepare for this trip with kids, that I came across that I don't think has been discussed widely in English language spheres, is they have what's called a parent-child center, 亲子馆. So 亲子馆, the parent-child centers, are just play centers. They're indoor play centers that are free, that are open to anyone, and they'll have 6-7 rooms. It almost feels a small children's museum.
Okay.
They're really great, and my wife would go without me, and my wife doesn't speak a lick of Chinese, or she speaks very little Chinese, and she didn't have any issues. The only issue is that they're only open for fairly limited hours. So I was looking at the one that we went to most frequently, and it was open from 9:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. But it, depending on the day, would either have a 2-hour lunch break or a 3.5-hour lunch break. Again, it's like the Museum for the Institute of History and Philology. You have to plan timing fairly well. But my kids loved the parent-child centers. They were great. And just overall, the Taiwanese people are incredibly welcoming of travelers with children. 7-Elevens are everywhere. Everywhere. You can go and stand in an intersection and probably see oftentimes 3 or 4 different convenience stores. It's incredibly dense infrastructure of convenience stores, which is great because you're never that far away from a diaper or something that the kids can eat. My kids actually really liked traditional Taiwanese breakfast food. They loved the 7-Elevens, and the papaya milk is the thing that they really loved out of the 7-Eleven. But there's a traditional Taiwanese breakfast called a danbing, a kind of savory egg pancake that's really good and just a great thing for kids to eat. My youngest was there when she was just starting to get teeth, and we were just starting to feed her solid foods. And so it was a great food for her. But my 4-year-old also adored the danbing, the egg pancakes. We still talk about it. I still hear her talk about it.
Very cool. We've got a little more time here. Anything else in the city itself that you would recommend?
We've alluded to the history of Taiwan, and I mentioned the KMT. The KMT came over from mainland China in 1945. They arrived in Taiwan, took it over, and they had some issues. And they eventually, to control Taiwan, and they founded a dictatorship, which was quite brutal and something that I think most folks outside Taiwan don't know the brutality of it. There are a couple of museums dedicated to talking about that fascinating history. There's a museum on the 228 incident that's right there in the center of Taipei that I would recommend. But I think the most interesting museum for me is the Jingmei White Terror Memorial Park, which has a museum in it. And you can actually go into one of the old prisons that were used to keep these human rights prisoners and walk through them and read information about the terror that they inspired.
That would be an interesting counterbalance to, like, for instance, I was in the Chiang Kai-shek Memorial Hall. There's an interesting other side of that U.S. supported regime too. Basically, from my history there, we were obviously supporting them because they were not mainland China and they were not communist, and we were not that selective, I would say, in the 50s, who our friends were, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Taipei 101. I would have to say, for personal experience, I recommend going up in Taipei 101.
Okay.
And it was the tallest building a little earlier than I was thinking. It was 73 when it was built. But one of the things that I particularly enjoyed about it was at the top, because this is earthquake country, which you've talked about, there's this interesting counterweight that you can see that keeps the tower balanced as it's swaying in the wind and such. That's just fascinating. This really heavy weight that is hanging up at the top, just below the observation platform there.
Chris, can I admit something that I probably shouldn't?
You've never been up in Taipei 101.
I've never been in Taipei 101. Yeah, sorry. Because it seemed like to me one of those things that were overrated, but now that you've recommended it, when I go back, I will have to do it. It's required.
I did enjoy it. And I also enjoyed soup dumplings in Din Tai Fung at the base, which is very touristy.
Yes.
But
I think Din Tai Fung is very good. My kids love the chocolate dumplings, which is completely unacceptable.
Chocolate dumplings.
It's from a Chinese perspective. It's completely unacceptable, but the kids absolutely loved it. I didn't get it. One thing
I didn't try that.
One thing I did want to recommend, it's not hard to get to. You're not going to see it recommended in tourist guidebooks. Taiwan has become this site of migration. So lots of folks from Southeast Asia are coming there. I talked about it with the Vietnamese women, but
I did not know that. That's
Vietnamese now makes up a significant portion of school children now speak Vietnamese in Taiwan, just because their moms are Vietnamese. It's something like 5 or 10%. It's quite large. And you have lots of other Southeast Asian workers that are coming in, Indonesians, Filipinos. There are lots of them there. Taipei has this awesome street that's just Indonesian restaurants.
Interesting.
Just east of Taipei main station. It's a little hard to get to because the streets around there are difficult. But if you search for the Indonesian food street, I would highly recommend it. My wife loves Indonesian food, and we did not find it, that street. I had just completely blanked on it until our last day there. And so we didn't get to spend that much time there, but it's fun. It's very much an Indonesian place. You have not just Indonesian food, but it's mostly Indonesian customers, and you've got Indonesian karaoke. It's just a really cool experience that you wouldn't expect.
Okay, and this is Little Indonesia is what I'm hearing people call it.
Sounds right, yeah.
Okay.
It's the one that's just east of Taipei, Maine, is that right?
That sounds right, yeah. Yeah, I'll put a link, by the way. I've only been in Taipei for 8 hours, so I know very little about Taipei or Taiwan, but I'll put a link to the article I have on how to spend 8 hours in a layover tour in Taipei, which included some of the things we did, including the Boan Temple, which was also interesting, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, or I think a local UNESCO World Heritage Site, a regional UNESCO World Heritage Site, I think. Cool. Excellent. Anything else we want to talk about in Taiwan before we get to some of our wrap-up questions?
There's a ton to do there. I think it's a great destination for anyone who's looking for something that's a little bit different. It's not Japan, it's not China, but it has elements of both. One of the things that when I try to explain Taiwan to people is it has everything I love about Japan and very little of what I don't like about Japan. It has a lot of what I love about China and very little of what I don't like about China. So it brings in the best of the East Asian powerhouses.
Excellent. As we get to our wrap-up questions, they've changed a little in the last decade since you were on, but you're standing in the prettiest spot in the Northern Taiwan region. Where are you standing? What are you looking at?
I'm going to say it's nighttime, and I'm in Pingxi Station, and I'm watching hundreds of sky lanterns ascend into the sky and hopefully not burn the place down in an hour.
And we didn't say, but I think you hinted at it. There's actually a lantern festival in there, and I suspect that's around the New Year's, which was what you were referring to.
Yes, and think it's maybe 15 days after the New Year's when the Lantern Festival is, but don't quote me on that. I ought to know with a PhD, but yeah.
And one thing that makes you laugh and say only in Northern Taiwan.
Only in Northern Taiwan can you go spend all day looking at these ancient 3,500-year-old Chinese turtle shells with Chinese writing on them, and then finish your day getting a bubble tea at a night market and trying some swordfish and running into a British prime minister.
Excellent. And if you had to summarize the region in just 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
History, nature, and night markets. Night market I'm going to go with as one word, like it is in Chinese.
I'll give you that. We'll give you that. Excellent. Our guest again has been Lee Moore. And the book again, tell us a little bit more about your book, which is out, I think, by the time this show comes out.
It's called China's Backstory, the History Beijing Doesn't Want You to Read. It looks at the 4 most important issues that Americans are seeing in their news feed: Hong Kong, the Chinese economy, Taiwan, and Xinjiang. It looks at those and goes into the history behind them, how these things they're in your news feed because they're these hot messes.
Mm-hmm.
How did they become hot messes? And I go do a deep dive onto each of them, and I look at Chinese sources, but I also try and make it fun. I know Chinese history can be really intimidating, so I have some things in there that I think are going to be very different from a typical Chinese book. The history of Xinjiang has a drinking game in it where every time someone gets beheaded in Xinjiang's very violent history, you're invited to take a sip of your favorite beverage. I think it happens 19 times. Some of these beheadings are massive.
So choose your beverage wisely.
Or read slowly. Enjoy.
Or read slowly. That's the other possibility. Okay.
Yeah. So that
Excellent.
should be coming out September 30th. It's available for pre-purchase even as we're recording.
And we'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Thanks,
Lee,
so much.
thanks so much for coming back on the show after all these years and sharing with us your obvious love for Northern Taiwan.
It's been awesome. Thanks so much, Chris.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? But with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers, a network of 130 million of them, in fact. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills, and did I say job title? See how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
The who's down in Who Newville were making their list, but some didn't know Walmart has the best brands for their gifts.
What about toys? Do they have brands kids have been wanting all year?
Yep, Barbie, Tony's, and Lego. Gifts that will make them all cheer.
Do you mean they have all the brands I adore?
They have Nintendo, Nespresso, Apple, and more.
What about...
So the Who answered questions from friends till they were blue. Each one listened and shouted, from Walmart? Who knew? Shop gifts from top brands for everyone on your list in the Walmart app.
A special thanks to the patrons of the show who help support Amateur Traveler financially. I'm looking forward to our monthly Zoom call this Saturday where I get to meet up with a number of them. I hope you can join us. If you're interested in learning on how you can become a patron of the show, go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. I heard from Julie who said, "Dear Chris, I've been a fan of Amateur Traveler for many years, having hiked Hadrian's Wall and taken a river trip in Costa Rica because of your podcast. Thanks. Love your gentle. Thanks so much," which inspires me, Julie. Thanks so much, Julie. And as I said, it's great when people like Julie write me and let me know that they're using the show. That will make it into my annual media kit. I heard from once and future guest on Amateur Traveler, Jonty Crane, who said, "I just listened to the Bhutan episode. Not sure he really sold the tiger's nest, though the photo on the front of the episode helps. I've added a few comments to the episode about hiking there, of course. Bhutan is a wonderful country, which I was fortunate enough to, literally given its cost, spend a month in. In my opinion, the main reasons to visit are its incredible culture, well covered in the episode, and the hiking, less well covered. On the latter, the Jamalhari Trek and the Layagasa Trek are the most popular multi-day hikes. Both visit the 7,326 meter, 24,035 feet Jamalhari Mountain. The best scenery is on the near month-long Snowman Trek, a seriously challenging hike. For something easier, the little visited Ha Valley to the west of Paro has some lovely day walks. They've also recently launched the Trans-Bhutan Trail, which is more of a cultural hike across the lower lands of the country. Also, note to the sustainable development fee, effectively a tourist tax of $200 a day, has been reduced to $100 a day since June 2023. I think they overestimated post-COVID demand. By the way, Bitcoin mining is due to Bhutan's large amount of hydropower, with Bitcoin mining needing cheap electricity. Sounds like you have some great episodes coming up, Jaunty. I do, and one of them, Jaunty, will be the guest on. We have episodes coming up on my Patagonia cruise, which I'm about to head out on Delhi, India, Libya, Eastern Turkey, Sarku, Pakistan, Utah parks, and Tunis, Tunisia. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so that you'll find those. If you're interested in joining me in 2026 in May in Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan, there are still spots available. Drop me an email or go to amateurtraveler.com/trips, which is a private Facebook group. With that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to chris2x@gmail.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And as always, Julie, this one's for you. Thanks so much for listening.